The Hawks just shocked the NBA. Let's get into this. Coming into this playoff series, a lot of people had the Philadelphia 76ers winning easily in the series versus the Atlanta Hawks. Some people thought the Sixers would win in 5 games in a gentleman's sweep, and some people even thought they would sweep the Atlanta Hawks in the second round. But of course, that didn't happen. After that pretty impressive Game 1 victory for the Atlanta Hawks, the Sixers took Games 2 and 3, and a lot of people thought at that point, alright, maybe the series is over at this point. But in Game 4, the Atlanta Hawks won again at home, which was a big win for them, tying it up 2-2 again. Then the Hawks won again in Game 5 in Philadelphia, putting them up 3-2, which is a huge win for them, and the Sixers kind of choked pretty badly in that game. Then Game 6, the Sixers won again. Then going into Game 7, a lot of people still had the Sixers winning this game, even though the Hawks have been so impressive throughout the whole series, and especially Trae Young. But as we all just saw, the Atlanta Hawks went into Philadelphia and ended up taking Game 7 with Trae Young having an awful game. This just shows coming into the season, nobody expected the Hawks to even do anything or even make the playoffs in general. Not only did they make the playoffs, they got by the Knicks pretty easily. Then they took on the Sixers, who were the best team in the Eastern Conference record-wise this year. They took them to 7 games and they actually beat them, and now they're going into the Eastern Conference Finals. Nobody at the beginning of the season would have saw this coming. No matter what ends up happening in the Eastern Conference Finals versus the Bucks, this season was an absolute success for the Atlanta Hawks, and they should be proud of what they were able to accomplish this year. The general manager of the Atlanta Hawks deserves so much credit for bringing in so many shooters during the offseason to help out Trae Young especially. Trae Young, of course, deserves a ton of credit for what he's been able to do in these playoffs. He's been incredible. Also, another guy who's a little underrated, who I recently made a video on, check that out if you haven't seen it, but Bogdan Bogdanovic also deserves a ton of credit. He's been really good as well in this playoffs. Other guys like Gallinari, Kevin Huerter, they just have guys all over the place that are really good players. John Collins has been playing well. They're just a very well-rounded team and a really good young team. But how did this happen? How did the Atlanta Hawks so overachieve to the point where they were able to beat the Philadelphia 76ers, who are the best team in the Eastern Conference? The first step the Atlanta Hawks took, because not a lot of people know this, but the Atlanta Hawks actually were struggling pretty significantly at the beginning part of the season under head coach Lloyd Pierce, who wasn't really a good head coach whatsoever. But ever since they fired him and upgraded Nate McMillan to their head coach position, everything changed for them. The first big change for them, because before they hired Nate McMillan, or upgraded him I should say, they were known as a really poor defensive team, but ever since they upgraded him, they instantly played significantly better on the defensive end, which made a ton of sense because Nate McMillan was known as being a great defensive head coach for the Indiana Pacers. Even before they fired Lloyd Pierce, the Hawks were always known as a really good offensive team that could just get buckets. The issue with them is they couldn't defend, and when you can't defend, you're not going to win games. So ever since they upgraded Nate McMillan, their defensive end significantly increased, and they played a lot better on the defensive end, and that really helped them become a great team. And now when you're talking about a team like the Atlanta Hawks that has shooters all around Trae Young, and Trae Young is such a great passer like we've seen in these playoffs, and they can also defend, they're not the best defensive team in the league, obviously, but they become a pretty decent defensive team, maybe even a little better than decent. Now you're a very lethal team. And I think that's really a big reason why the Atlanta Hawks are so underrated going into these playoffs, is due to the fact how much better their defense improved ever since they hired Nate McMillan or upgraded him. And I don't think people really realize how good of a defensive team this team has really become, because everybody knew they're a great offensive team, but when it comes down to the playoffs, if you can't defend, you're not going to win. All your weaknesses get exposed, as we've seen, by the way, from Ben Simmons, who I will make a video about. He's just been playing terribly. But your weaknesses get exposed because the other team has every single game to focus on you, game after game. So how well the Atlanta Hawks played in the offensive end tells you how great of an offensive team this team truly is, but the fact that they were able to stop their opponents on the defensive end shows you how good of a defensive team they are as well. But let's get into why the Hawks are so effective on the offensive end and what makes them dangerous. So of course, when you have Trae Young in your team is going to be very dangerous on the offensive end, but what Trae Young does so effectively is he runs the pick and roll with Clint Capella or John Collins or whoever, and he has that same motion, so he can either put up the floater or he can throw up the lob with the exact same motion, and he doesn't make up his mind until the absolute last second. So that makes him very dangerous. So he either puts up that wide open floater, or if you contest that, he throws in that same motion, that lob to Clint Capella or whoever's the role guy in that offense, and he can just dunk it down very easily. So now when Trae Young is so effective either putting up that floater or throwing that lob to Clint Capella, as a defense you might want to bring in another guy to try to stop that. So you can do that, and we have seen that. But notice how I mentioned before in the video that during the offseason, the Atlanta Hawks brought in shooters all around Trae Young. So now let's say you bring a third guy into the paint to try to stop both either the floater or the lob. You can do that, but now Trae Young is smart enough and has the ability to kick out to one of his three-point shooters, which is everywhere on his team. You got Gallinari, Kevin Huerter, Bogdanovich. John Collins could hit the three. Solomon Hill plays sometimes as well. And now, more often than not, those three-point shooters are going to hit those three-point shots, which hurts you a lot more. And now it just puts you in the dilemma. What do you do on the defensive end? Do you keep everybody home and just let Trae Young beat you by getting floaters and throwing up that lob? Or do you bring in that extra defender and make other players beat you, but they have been hitting threes all series long and throughout the whole season, I should say. And not to mention, that's not the only thing Trae Young could do. He's not only a pick and roll guy, he can also hit those very deep threes like we've seen, and he can use his handles to get open three-point shots as well. But also on their team, they have a guy coming off the bench like Lou Williams, who's another guy who's a great ball handler and can score very efficiently off the bench, which helps him out a significant amount as well. Also, a guy like Kevin Huerter has been very good, especially in this Game 7, as we saw. He's been a very good scorer for them as well, not just a three-point shooter. They also have Bogdanovich, who I think is very underrated. He's a great three-point shooter as well, but I think he could do more things on the offensive end than just catch and shoot. He can get to the basket, he can pull up by himself, create his own shot. They just have great players on the offensive end. And we've seen that especially in the series against the Sixers, because coming into this series, the Sixers were known as probably the best defensive team in the NBA, if not a top 2 or 3 team on the defensive end, and they've had a lot of trouble guarding this Atlanta Hawks team, especially the pick and roll defense with Trae Young. And that's really what happened in this playoff series. The Hawks are so good in the offensive end. There were a few games where they were able to get stopped a little bit, slow down a little bit, but they were able to neutralize the Sixers on the offensive end more than the Sixers were able to neutralize them on the offensive end, and that was really the difference in the series. Now, did the Hawks get lucky that the Sixers choked in a few games with pretty big leads? Yeah, of course, but either way, you got to give a ton of credit to what the Hawks were able to do and actually come back from those huge deficits. And also, did the fact that Ben Simmons completely lost his confidence help out the Hawks? Of course, but you also have to give them credit for what they were able to do on Ben Simmons and really make it difficult on him in order for him to lose his confidence in the first place. But either way, Ben Simmons passed up a wide open dunk that I think we all saw. His confidence was completely gone and he had an awful series. But let's see what happens in the next series in the Eastern Conference Finals with the Bucks and Hawks. I think that's going to be a really good series. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Hawks are going to win this playoff series against the Bucks, or do you think the Bucks are going to win this playoff series? Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out, guys.